this is really Aaron and Nikki and Lauren, the show, but I wanted to take a moment to say a huge thank you to, first of all, to Aaron, to Nikki, for bringing the idea of this project to our attention and providing the muscle, working and walking alongside Aaron to make this possible. I won't steal their thunder, so I won't get into anything further, but Aaron, and to Mike, who gave permission for Aaron to be involved with this project, thank you so very much. None of this would have been possible without your leadership and your involvement. So thank you to both of you and to the rest of the library crew. And Nikki, thank you for your guidance and your leadership and your wisdom. Who thought you came to us with the idea of looking in our archives to see who were the first Black students to ever attend Paul Smith College. And today we're going to unveil and talk about it and have a lot of fun, and we are grateful to you. So without any further ado, most of you know her. Nikki is the executive director of the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. And Nikki, I turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Terry. Terry has quickly become a friend. So I just want to thank Terry Lindsay, because I think he exists as a couple of things for me, right? So I'm Jamaican, American, and so for me, I didn't even know Terry was Jamaican, and so when I got there and he switched and started speaking Patois to me, it made the North Country feel like home, you know, because I was 5 hours away from my family in the Bronx, and I haven't chosen this journey, but I'm happy that he was there as one of the first person I met in academia in the North Country, and he just made me welcome, and this feels like home. He's one of the reasons this feels like home. But I want to thank everyone for being here. But before that, I want to acknowledge this project started. It really started with the library, with the Paul Smith's Library. And it started with Amanda. Amanda, if you are on here, I want to acknowledge Amanda immensely. Amanda reached out to me and she said, Nikki, we have a space for Black History Month in the library. We have a couple of showcases, display cases, and we'd love for you to put something in there about the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. And the Adirondack Diversity, you can go read up about Adirondack Diversity Initiative another time, because really this space isn't for me and for the initiative right now. It's really about centering, talking about the project, centering the Black experience at Paul Smith College, and then for Lauren to really set the stage, set the moment, set the tone, and take it over. But Amanda reached out to me and she asked if there was anything, and the Adirondack Diversity Initiative is fairly new in terms of its infrastructure. And so I said to her, really, that's not what we're here for. We're not here to promote ourselves. We are here to help the community do a lot of self-reflective work, a lot of the difficult work, so that we can center the voices on the margin, so that we can articulate equity and justice in a way that is critical and transformative. And so for me, when I get asked to come in to welcome to Paul Smith College to do something, the first thing I said, I would like to do something that gets Paul Smith to do some self-reflective work on the ways in which people of color, people on the margins, persons who are minoritized or underserved, their lived experiences on the campus throughout the history. And everybody, Michael, Erin, Amanda, all of the other people that I don't remember their names, was jumped on it, and everything I threw out. I said, let's go to the archives. Let's look and see what images are there, right? Let's see if we can build a narrative. And in building the narrative, we're going to be asking questions. Now, we made multiple attempts, because I'm always talking about people of color, people who are not part of what we call normativity, writing and narrating their own stories. I'm very, very much about that. I was raised mostly Rastafarian. And there's a lot of mythical black male patriarchy in Rastafari. You know, that is very, very evident in sort of their mythologization of the continent and masculinity and femininity. But what Rastafari has taught me is that the colonial project, the colonial and imperial project tends to write for and define and articulate and decide what is knowledge and who can produce knowledge and whether or not that knowledge produced is critical and meaningful. And so for me, what we wanted to do, even the beginning, we wanted to find Black students to be a part of the design, the creation, the inception, the articulation, picking the pictures, talking about where this process would go. We didn't end up getting the students to be involved as much as we'd want to, or any at all, because they didn't have the time, or I got a sense that the students didn't really know what this was about, right? But regardless, we were able to do a lot of work, and I was only able to do the work because of Amanda, Michael, Erin, and all the other people in the library who was just very, very excited about this process. You should have seen us in the library when I said, I want to look at your archives. I want to see what you got. They rolled out almost every single yearbook from 1948, okay? And we spread them out, and everybody was knee deep finding images that tracked or traced the Black experience. And so we went all the way back to 1952 when the first 2 Black males were enrolled. I'm still writing the narrative because I don't want to send anything that hasn't been vetted, historically vetted. And so I'm writing the narrative and building a narrative about the people that were there. And that's a little bit more difficult because you want to tell truths, and you want to speak to people about what the truth was happening. And so what you'll see is that we found, normative pictures for the time, right? But also what we found were trends that had a lot of question marks around them. For example, we saw that in 1969, what looked like it was the first Black female, 1969. So from 1972, with the enrollment of first 2 Black males, then the next Black female we found, the first Black female, was in 1969. So was there a gap? Is this true? This is what we're seeing in the images and the archival work that we have access to. So the college, we have the college's alumni office may be able to tell us something different, right? But this is what we found, those images. And the images were, of course, very sanitized. And the few Black people that were there were involved in the traditional things like sports and recreation. Now, if Amanda and Michael and Erin, if you remember anything that any processes that might enlighten some of what I'm saying, jump in. We saw, but more striking was the fact that most of the students, and so I went to Mount Holyoke College. That was my undergrad. It's an all women's college in Massachusetts. And I'm sort of an agitator, especially when colleges are disingenuous about how they are counting their numbers, especially their numbers when they're profiling themselves as very diverse. And the numbers that they were profiling for the Black students on campus was disingenuous. And at the time, I was an international student from Jamaica, and I was in my junior year. And I'm going to connect the stories here. And I said to them, in your data that you send out to recruit students, you say that you have a Black population of 28%. But 20% of that are international students. How disingenuous is that? Are you serving the Black community here? How many of the students, the Black students, are from Holyoke, Springfield, Massachusetts, right? And so it's disingenuous to market because the Black experience is not monolithic. The Black diaspora is not monolithic. So the Black student, the 20% of international Black students that you have coming on that campus are going to have a different lived experience and relationship to oppression than African Americans and people who have lived there. And so that is what we saw when we looked at the archives, that many of the Black students that had come, except for the first 2 Black male students who came from the Bronx, many of them were international students who had been identified or positioned as Black because of how America racializes people of color when they enter. And I know this from working at for the US State Department for 7 years. When you come off of that plane and you pass through immigration, you get racialized, sexualized, gendered, all of these categories. You then have to be slotted in and perform so that you are recognizable in this country. I'm not saying it doesn't exist everywhere else, because in the islands and I've lived in Norway, we struggle with the vestiges of the horrible kind of colonialism and anti-Black self-hate, okay? So here we are, all of us working through these archives, and we're seeing these things, and these themes are coming up. And then we get on 2 very striking photos and articles. One, and you'll see them when you go through the archives. One is this is 1973 now. One is of a Black male. And we saw his pictures when he just got to Paul Smith's College. His hair was cut low because he was coming from, I think it was either Kenya or Uganda. You guys can correct me. Hair was cut low, he's squeaky clean. He was very colonial African for 1973, if you know anything about the Africans under colonial Africa in 1973, right? So he's definitely coming out of a very, very traditional colonial African background. Here he is, 1970. By 1973, he has an afro. Yeah, he has a big afro, and his face, and when you go onto his face is the one that's on the flyer, the advertisement for the website. That's him. But when you see his original picture, he was squeaky clean in a tie and jacket. But by that time, he was the center of an article. And the major thing, and I think it was Erin that said, look at this, Nikki. Look at what the article is saying. It says that he was tired of people asking him if he lived in Hudson, Africa. Yeah, and there was a full article where they were asking him these questions. He said he loved coming to school here, all of that. He was an international student, but he started talking about how annoying those tropes were, those stereotypes of Africans and how they lived their lives. And then immediately in the same year, there was a picture, there's another picture that has been superimposed onto that big picture. And it's a picture of, and I would love for the bigger picture to be there. It's in the door. So this is 1973, no tobacco cessation laws, nothing. So in the picture, mostly white males in the dorm. They're chilling, some has drinks, they're smoking. I don't know what they're smoking, probably a butt or a blunt, you know, it's 1973, right? Everybody's radical and living free. And you know, they're spread out. Everybody is smiling on that photo, except this very, very tall Black male with a brig furrow and some glasses. And he's standing in the back with his fists in the air like this. In the middle of the revelry, the chilling, yeah, he is, and no smile on his face. And they published a full spread of that picture. And there was no comment about it. And so you have to understand what was going on at the time, right? So that probably, him having the fist probably wasn't seen, because the Black Power movement was very strong during then, wasn't seen as anything odd. But that for me was a critique of silence, okay? There were some silences going on, right? What was going on in the middle of that moment where he felt that he couldn't smile and chill and just be in the moment with his white classmates. And so those were sort of the critical focus photos that we saw, and we thought that they needed a background, they needed a story, they needed a telling, right? And they needed some question marks, because we failed to, we needed to know, the ADI was here to help Paul Smith navigate the history of the Black experience just for, it was supposed to be for Black Heritage Month. But because of delays and so on, we didn't get it in. But then Terry came along, and Terry, after we had to close down, we had gotten to the point where Erin had mocked up a stellar, because it was supposed to be a standing installation, not digital. And when Terry came to us and said, "Can you do this digitally?" I was hesitant, but Erin was like, "Hell no, we got this. We can do this." And so from there, Erin has taken over and went above and beyond in making and realizing this. And she brought, Lauren, she brought you to my attention, and since I've been just ruminating in your work. I've read your writings, and I've watched you sing and audition, and I've fallen in love with some of the poetry and your spoken word pieces. And one of my questions really, I keep listening to Whiplash over and over and over again, because I think it's so relevant to our times. And so let me stop talking, introduce you, and then I'm going to let you take over. And then I want to ask you after you're finished, I'll ask you 1 or 2 questions, the 2 questions I sent to you, and then it's you.
Nikki, before you introduce Lauren, you glossed over something that's extremely important, and I'm wondering if you could go back and kind of elaborate on the significance of that experience. So you said that the young man in the photo showed a clenched fist.
Yeah,
at that time, a lot of stuff were going on in the United States. He was in the middle of the Adirondacks, probably with all white students, and he was sending a message. Now, I know you can't be in his head to know what message he was sending, but based on the time, on the period, what do you suppose he was trying to say by his by the clenched fist?
So you can see the photo. The photo, you can go and see the photo. It shows everyone, right? It's a wide angle photo, and for me, it is a level of discontent, and I feel that not so much what he was saying, but there was a lot of dissonance in that room. There's a lot of dissonance in that room in terms of recognizing that there was no belonging for this Black male. That's how I'm feeling that they and also remember, this Paul Smith College is relatively remote, right? This is 1973, relatively remote. And yes, I'd have to say 99%, there were 2 other Black males in that photo, but 99% of the 20 or 30 males that were in that photo were all white males, right? So there's the massive sense of isolation. And whether or not, I won't know whether or not there were spaces and opportunities created to center and make the Black students feel as though they could claim space there. Because remember, a lot of these spaces of higher education were created by specific kinds of white males. They were not created for us. So when we show up, we are claiming space. We are claiming space. And that's one of the things I want to ask Lauren, is how does she position herself as someone who is claiming, reclaiming, articulating a space, a voice, a narrative for, by, and about the Black experience. And even though I'm speaking specifically about the Black experience, I am forever cognizant of the ways our lived reality is specifically intersectional, and how those social categories to which we are tied and to which we claim are co-constituted to inform not just our lived realities, but our oppressions, right? So I get all of that, but in this moment, we're speaking specifically about the Black experience, which means in that moment, in that picture, all I can think right now as a Black female living in this country, that he was feeling a sense of anti-Black racism that could only be expressed by his raised fist in the middle of all that white dissonance. So that's, remember, I'm seriously projecting, right? And I'm seriously carrying my own implicit biases that are cultural, feminist, queer, spiritual, religious, all of those things into a time frame and at a moment that we're still trying to discover what's going on. And we'll never know what, until we can locate this man or this male to find out what was going on in that picture, right? Which is part of my project in terms of writing the narrative. But yeah, so I'm not sure if that gets at that. So yeah. But
thank you.
Awesome. So if there's nothing else, I want to introduce Lauren. Yeah. So Lauren, I'm going to apologize. Read from your bio, right? And then because I can't wait for it to just be you bringing your spirit and essence to the space. All right? Yeah, man. So everyone, thank you so much for being here. Lauren Whitehead is a writer, performer, and MFA recipient in dramaturgy. I'm speaking my Jamaican accent, from Columbia University. She writes in several forms, including poetry, nonfiction, adaptations, and drama. Her writings have been published in Apogee Journal, Winter Tangerine, Heart Online Journal, and in selected anthologies, including Black Street Beat Poems, Volume 2 of Black Girl Magic. Most recently, Lauren adapted Ta-Nehisi Coates' award-winning memoir, Between the World and Me, which I still have on my desktop for staging. So I need to see that one. I haven't seen that one yet, Lauren. For staging at the Apollo Theater and the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, which was directed by Camila Forbes. Lauren has performed her work in venues around the country, including the Sundance Film Festival, the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, and the, I'm gonna mispronounce this, I apologize, the New Yorker Poets Cafe. Poets Cafe. Last fall, Lauren originated the leading role of Unsung in the opera We Shall Not Be Moved, which she has performed at the Wilma Theater, the Apollo Theater, and at the Sadschouwburg Theater, I may have that wrong too, in Amsterdam, directed by Bill T. Jones. Prior to that, she adapted and performed the role of Zila in A Bright Room Called Day at Connolly Theater. Lauren has also written and performed 2 one-woman shows, Written in Blues, which was presented in Afro Solo Festival, the Left Coast Leaning Festival at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts and Diverse Works in Houston, Texas, and A Tribe Called Blessed, which debuted at the Women's Center Stage Festival at the Lynn Redgrave Theater. Lauren is a Sundance Theater Lab Fellow, and she has worked as a dramaturg at Hedgebrook and at the Denver Center for Performing Arts. In addition to maintaining a long list of freelance dramaturgy clients, her work as a writing coach was featured in 2 documentaries. Russell Simmons Presents Brave New Voices, which is fabulous. You need to check her clip, her segment in that, and Don't Be Nice. Lauren teaches dramaturgy. Please, Lauren, please pronounce that in the African-American dialectic for me. And playwriting. So Lauren teaches dramaturgy and playwriting at the New School in New York. Everyone, please make way, please make room for this amazing, I'm gonna reuse and misuse phenomenal female. Just thank you, Lauren.
Oh, Nikki, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. Yay, this is what we've been doing in my Zoom classes. That's how you do applause. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for reading my full bio. I haven't had my full bio read in a long time. Sometimes it's helpful to remember, oh shit, I've done a couple things in my life. And you were saying it right, it is dramaturgy, and nobody knows how to say that theater in Amsterdam, so don't worry about that. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to have the context of your introduction of what we're doing here and what we're talking about. And I'm really, I was thrilled to see that picture. Thank you to Mike for sharing it in the chat. I don't know if everybody knows this, but there is a chat functioning happening on this Zoom where if you click on the little chat bubble down at the bottom, you can participate in a discussion that's happening in real time with us. So if you have something that you want to say and you just can't hold it, feel free to enter it in the chat. Anyway, Mike put the picture of the gentleman that you were talking about in the chat, and it was fascinating to see that photo, and it's almost impossible to not project all of my own experiences onto that man's face, right? And even if what he's experiencing in that moment is not overt anti-Black racism, the isolation that you mentioned, the need to perform, all of the sense that you don't belong in that space is so prevalent in that raised fist. And so whether or not he was performing Blackness because he knew somebody was taking a photo, that performance is actually really illustrative of what he might be feeling all the time, which is the need to remind people that he's there and the desire to be seen. And so I think part of that desire to be seen and that need to remind people that we're here runs really central through a lot of the work that I do, and has everything to do with how I grew up and the institutions that I studied in over the last 20 years of my, how old am I? Yeah, long time of my educational life, right? So I grew up in the suburbs outside of Chicago, Chicago being one of the most segregated cities in the United States still, and the suburbs even more so. And I went to what I like to call red line private schools, which is to say that my family intentionally moved us just inside the district line so we could go to these incredibly amazing schools. And it was so just inside the line that my neighbors, people who lived on the other side of the street, didn't go to the same school as I did. So my parents were really deliberate about making sure that my brother and I would be well educated. And so we lived in a neighborhood that was mostly Black. And the people on one side of the street were able to go to District 125, and the people on the other side of the street were not able to go to District 125 until my parents made sure that we lived on the right side of the street, literally the right side of the street. And that meant that the school that I went to was exceptional in terms of my curriculum and in terms of the way that I was instructed, in terms of pedagogy, but it also meant that in my high school, which was humongous, there were 4,000 students in the school total, 995 students in my graduating class, and 3 of us were Black. Those are the kinds of numbers that we're talking about. So when you talk about isolation, when you talk about desire to belong, when you talk about the performance, when you talk about all those things, I know those things in my bones and body as if it were I remember very well being a very young girl and only having white friends, really, because there were no other Black girls in my school, and playing Pretty Pretty Princess, and one girl, and winning that game with these girls, and the girl telling me, you can't be the Pretty Pretty Princess because the Pretty Pretty Princess can't be Black. Now this is like formative, and she didn't know necessarily what she was saying, but she was looking at the cover of that box, and there was no Black princess on the cover of that box. And so I feel like for a long time, I have been learning implicitly or explicitly that I can't be a princess, that I don't belong, that I'm the only one, that I have to represent for all of us, that my experience is the universal experience, right? I have all the stories that you've ever heard about being the one in class that has to read the N-word, or people looking at me when I have every single one of those stories I've experienced wholly and fully and multiple times. And it wasn't until I began writing for myself, trusting that my story is the same and also different, that I began to feel like I had a place in the grander American narrative. And so now what I spend a lot of my time doing is instructing students to write from their own experience, to be self-reflective humans, and to do so that they can add to this larger collective narrative that is, what does it mean to be an American, really? And how do we center the stories of people of color who, even when they're not in the story, are always a part of the story? And so I think I'm gonna share a couple poems, and then we'll talk about your questions, and maybe there'll be some questions in the chat, and just kick it afterwards. Does that sound like the plan? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go in reverse order of the poem's vintage, which is to say I'm going to start with the newest poem that I've written, go back a little bit, and then go to one of the first poems where I was able to articulate myself as a Black woman in America. But I think it's maybe disingenuous of me to not start by sharing something that has everything to do with this very present moment, which is to say we're living in a global pandemic. We're in a room and none of us are in a room together. And so there's this weird thing where like, we're having community, but are we having community? It feels very disconnected and also very connected at the same time. And that's a strange and disorienting feeling for me in a lot of ways. But beyond that, my father is a 62-year-old man and he is a manager at a grocery store. And so he is an essential worker. I've been calling him a first line worker. He is at his grocery store right now. And that, you know, gives me fits. It really frightens me a lot. So I'm gonna start by reading a poem about him just to sort of bring us in the moment and hopefully, I don't know, just ground us in where we are right now. So this is called It was already dangerous. Working the 2 to 12 shift, driving home in the shiny dark under the sleepless moon, curling his car around suburban back roads, almost every day pushing drowsily his nice enough to not get pulled over SUV, iced coffee sugared and milked into cake. It was already dangerous, diabetic as he is, for him to be smoking all these cigarettes in the empty parking lot, laughing and missing all these meals, even while working the 2 to 12 a.m. shift at the high-end grocery where the cured meats have their own specified domain, hanging hocks of pork sliced thin by a woman in starched whites and a paper hat, the grocery where you build your own six-pack, and also where my dad manages young, undereducated smokers in the business of facing groceries as they come out of the box. You probably haven't wondered whose hands make known the difference between scented and unscented garbage bags, which hands attend the 200 plus flavors of tea in aisle 3 of your local. You probably pass on asking by the perfected symmetry of toothpastes and soaps, neatly packed, straight-backed like soldiers, but it's my dad, working the near night shift, stacking organic frozen pizzas in the cooler, label out so you don't mistake your vegan for your 4 cheese. He is a connoisseur of cabbage, a kale fluffing man who knows each condiment by its color-coded brand, and it was already laborious, throwing box after box off a forklift, hauling pallets of pesto and pasta sauce. It was already heavy, but now also all the extra loads of alcohol, ammonia, bleach, dual-action disinfectant, wipes, and toilet paper, all the near night canned meats and hard cheese and frozen everything. He's already 62, the ideal vintage for an otherwise indiscriminate virus which lives for days maybe on hard surfaces like linoleum grocery floors or metal grocery racks or aluminum soup cans or lipstick stained wine glasses haphazardly left on shelves all over his high-end grocery by tipsy white women who don't believe in crisis until it hits their homes. It was already hard not to bring his work home, but now it's more dangerous, this already thankless and unseen and ignorable work. It was too much even before all this impatience, all this insistence, even before all this aggressive fear made him miserable, visible, vulnerable, essential. Thank you. I recently became a mother. I have a 9-month-old baby who might make a vocal appearance in this Zoom. And he's downstairs squealing right now. And even before that, I had been thinking, thank you for the congratulations, thank you. He is the light of my life and one of the only things keeping me sane in this sort of insane moment. Anyway, so I have, even before I became a mother, I thought a lot about Black motherhood, that intersectional identity that we're talking about being a Black woman, and how that is also a dangerous place to live, not just because our lives are at risk, but because the work of becoming a mother, the joy of becoming a mother, is something that can easily be stripped away from us by, people in America who haven't done work on their implicit biases. And in this case, I'm talking specifically about police officers who look at our Black boys and see Black men, who look at Black boys and feel more fear than they do empathy or desire to protect them. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, and I wrote a poem about the average Black mother. And I think that this has a lot to do with what you were saying, Nikki, about narratives, about how we create our own narratives, and how we produce a kind of knowledge and just the ability to narrate our own experiences, those that are both deeply individual and also sort of universal in our community. And so I think this poem speaks a lot to that. It's called One Night Epic. October 20th in 2014 was a Thursday. I don't know that for sure. I could look it up, but let's just say it was a Thursday. This story works better if it's a Thursday, because Thursday is the night the Black mother gets off. It's the night the Black mother curls up on a knockoff Crate and Barrel couch with 4 fingers of Cabernet in a long-legged wine glass, serving season 4 Olivia Pope in sweats and sweaters and popcorn for dinner, mourning a man still alive but gone nonetheless. You see where I'm going with this, right? Because it's a Thursday, the woman is home alone, probably in love herself with 2 men, the gone man and the other gone man. 2 gone men, neither of which is her son, who she also loves and who is also somewhere out there not calling. Let's say, for story's sake, he's right about 17. Right about all his mama's wish men, but the Black mother is sad. Even the Black son can see that. So let's say he makes plans for Thursdays, loves his mother alone on Thursdays. For strictly narrative purposes, I should also add that the Black son has drug in his blood. The Black son has drug blood from a who knows when but long ago laced party he participated in. Let's call it junior prom. Let's say there's a flashback to the junior prom in the movie version of this story, the Black son taking sips from a flask, laughing loud and alive. Let's say the Black son promised the Black mother he wouldn't drink too much, wouldn't disrespect his date. Let's say he abides those things but concedes she didn't say shit about smoking weed. And let's say she didn't say shit because the Black mother and the Black son are both secret weed smokers. And that's really why she loves TGI Thursdays. Remember, it's Thursday, and on Thursday, she loves a little weed with her wine to make thin her thick wanting. And the Black son, he likes it because it makes the girl he likes giggle. Let's say he's 17 and just learning how to get girls to giggle. Let's say she's 40 and trying to get a little giggle herself. You see what I'm saying? Stop me if you've heard this murder before. It's 2014, Thursday. There's a Black mother and a Black son, and the mother is home alone on the couch, and her son is walking back to the knockoff apartment alone late. No, let's say it's dusk. It's better if it's dusk. If this story has a little light in it, let's say it's early autumn dusk and the Black son is walking home. He has a bike, maybe for the sake of the story. Let's say he had a bike, but the bike is wrecked. Let's say the Black son didn't like that bike anyway. Don't like none of the knockoffs the Black mother buys. The Black son is type ungrateful, is 17, has been drunk, but not this Thursday, just a bit high, just half pissed at the giggling girl for flirting with some other boy. Let's say some white boy, even though she's also Black, one of the only Black girls in his school. And let's say the Black son is angry because they're supposed to go together, them being the only ones. We can all understand that, right? So the Black son is walking mad. The Black mother is home high, both waiting and not waiting for the unambiguous rush of reefer in with the wind of her son through the door. She doesn't want him to smoke, but the Black mother ain't a hypocrite. She scratched together a bike for him, moved him to this right side of the city for the schools. Let's say the schools are better here, even though the school is full of talk-back white kids who buy cars with their leftover allowances. And meanwhile, the Black mother burned through 2 savings and 2 men who were not the Black son's father to get him these bike easy streets, to get him that 10-spin lead up against the wall in the hallway. Okay, so the Black son does have a dad that is gone, but it's not what you think. The Black dad wants to be home, but can't because the Black dad is a patriot overseas, fighting in a who knows when but long ago waged war. Let's say there's a montage of the Black dad at war, dodging shrapnel, wrapping wounds, laughing with his fellow soldiers in a desert bunker somewhere. See, that keeps the story fresh. If the Black family loves America, respects America, drinks her wine and watches her TV and wears her flag upright on the bloody sleeve of their fatigues. Let's say both the Black mother and the Black son are proud of the Black dad. Let's even say the Black mother has a sticker for the Marines on the bumper of her van. Let's say she drives a van so that the story is more wholesome, but let's acknowledge that the Black mother is also a Black woman who couldn't wait, who wouldn't wait for the end of a war to be held and warm as a deep red in her veins. Let's just say she has needs, is strong and secure, but not all virtue with her hand-rolled joints, her love of vodka and boxed wine. Let's say she gets sick of her Black son's smart mouth sometimes, cusses, once raised her hand to him because let's just say she needs these Thursdays, lives for these Thursdays, the house empty of the Black son's sweaty demands. Let's just say she loves him even while she is both waiting and not waiting for him to come home safe. And I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say that the Black son is not safe, okay? Let's say the police presence has increased since the dadless Black family has come. Let's say some white girl's mother finally thought it time to talk about rape. Let's just say that tonight the Black son has done nothing but fight with his girlfriend, smoke like his mama smokes, walk slow and alone in the cool crisp of an almost night, and still will not make it home safe. The Black son is not safe, and still, can't you see? Or won't you see that somewhere in this story there has been already plenty enough reason for him to die tonight? Thank you.
Oh, that was powerful. Oh my gosh, that was power. Power. Jamaicans would say fire. Yes, man, that was fire. Thank you very much, Lauren. Are you going to do more? Because I really want to. Go ahead, honey. This is okay. Make it happen.
I was going to do one more.
No, man, keep going. You can't. You're a stage. Fire. I'm going to get off. Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna do one more, and then if you want to talk about whiplash, maybe there's a time in the discussion where I'm conscious of I'm presenting a lot, and so I want to be able to have this be a conversation as organically as possible. But I do want to do one more because this is the one that Natalie recommended that I do. It's probably most appropriate for the context of what we're talking about right now, but it's also one of my oldest poems ever. Like, it's one of the first poems that I ever wrote, and it is decidedly comes from the place of absolute frustration that students of color often feel when they're in primarily white institutions and no one wants to hear what they have to say. And so it is admittedly frustrated, it is admittedly angry, but it is also one of my most enduring pieces because it's maybe the first time that I ever wrote something that felt so true and so terrifying to articulate, and yet once I did, I found my audience. I found my people. People were like, oh, me too. And suddenly I had community. And so I want to share this poem with you, one, because it was requested, but also because I think there's something about candid articulation and getting beyond the fear of that kind of candid articulation, which is probably the only thing that you can do in situations where you feel terrified, to find community, to find the thing that's going to save your life. And this poem actually did that for me. And so I just want to share this, and then we'll talk a little bit, and if there's time, I'll do whiplash as well. So this is called For Those Who Want to Know What It's Like to Be This Black Chick. It's after Patricia Smith, and I think I wrote it in 2009, which, y'all, that's like a decade ago, which is wild. Anyway, for those who want to know what it's like to be this black chick. It's like crab apple pie or mulberry muffins. Get used to being almost as good. Get used to the curve and being below it. Get used to inadequacy and overcompensation. It's like, shh, too loud for the library. Get used to reading about a self that is not you and a history that is not yours. Get used to the lies. There will be no relief, so get used to being uncomfortable. It's like rose thorn sofa beds or gumming concrete. It's stone chips in your throat. It's difficult to speak up from here, so get used to the down talk. It's like your tongue puppeteered, dancing like a harlequin. Get used to the jig, it's all they want to see. Get used to these pronouns, they are all that matter. Get used to being us or them, even though it is just you. Get used to the solitude. It's like solo in sight of several thousand others. Get used to being other and having silence as your sidekick, because outsiders won't speak to you either. It's not you. It's your eyes, the way they water like melons. It will make them afraid, fear of a fresh fruit. You are too healthy for them. Get used to being sick of labels, of boxes, of television and radio, of white people and black people, of men staring, of women staring, of boys and girls. Step right up. It's like a fucking freak show in here. It's like drinking piss for breakfast. Not too tasty, but it does the job. Get used to long hours and bad employers. Get used to quitting and starting over and quitting and starting over again. Get used to repeating yourself. It's like routine. It's like scrap metal. It's like pennies at the bottom of the well. Get used to saving your money, your time, yourself from yourself. Get used to hiding behind wet bellies and warm bodies. Get used to the cold. It's like a temporary fix for a permanent personality. It's like hopping scotch and hoping liquor will keep you warm once he's left. Get used to him leaving. Get used to running after him, to him, from yourself and in circles. Get used to being dizzy and falling back into bad habits and back into yourself and back into bad habits again. It's like white flags and white water, whitewashing and white coats, and white blood cells being low, and white liberals being high and mighty. It's like white schools and white teachers, white chalk and white boards, white hope and white women being standard and white men being boss. Get used to white collars and white houses, white fences and white flight, white guilt and white power and pure white and off-white and egg white and powder white and the white horse and white gods with fucking blue eyes. It's like little white lies and big ass white tigers. It's like white sauce. It's like white out. It's like Lauren Ashley Whitehead. It's like everything is white because it is. It's like being black because you are, and it's just like that. So get used to it. Cool. Thank you.
Oh my.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
The power. Your whatever you're saying is literally shifting the energy, right? And I often, even in my own cultural consciousness sessions, the first thing I ask my white allies or the white curious or people who identify as white is just be okay with the discomfort. That's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to build some resilience and some stamina around the discomfort when we talk about race. Okay? Yeah. And the most important thing, and what I've seen you do, is articulate and disrupt and define and redefine the blackness in and out of normativity, in and out of traditional view, in and out of sanitized, in and out of traditional kinship formations. But I really, really, really want to ask everyone just to be okay with the discomfort, you know, and it's okay. And if you have started doing it, redefining race in a way that makes it redefining race that's in a critical way, that it's not just black and white. And I'm not speaking race, they're gray, and it's not just you're bad or good. That is a part of my language. That is some bullshit fallacy. That is really some bullshit fallacy that we need to attend to. You know what I'm saying? But you started doing that, and oh my God, I don't even know where to start. I was taking so many notes, right? I'm just gonna start with my question because I want you to take over. I'm going to silence myself very soon. So let me, the first question I had for you was very open and doesn't talk about the poetry that you just did. I have some notes on that, but I'm going to let the students and people who are here take the lead. How do you see your role? And I said it before, in either the reclamation or creation of a space for, by, and about Black people of color. And so you started talking about that, but could you just go with that? And then what I'll do is I'll let you take over from there. I think the second question about whiplash is more me.
We can talk about that later.
Go into that one, but you've given me some powerful new ones. Really? Yeah. So go ahead.
It's interesting to talk about this, to think about this question in terms of role. Like, what is my role in making space? And I as a person who is multi-hyphenate in my personal identity, right? I'm Black, queer, woman, wife, mother, daughter, like multi-hyphenate. I have a lot of those identity markers, and also a person who's multi-hyphenate in terms of my artistic production and my work life, right? I am writer, performer, dramaturg, educator, actor, singer, you know, all those things that the notion that I have a singular role in terms of making space for people of color is really hard for me to wrap my head around. So that said, I think that the best thing I can do in terms of naming what my role is, I think my job is to create space for people who might have some fear around articulating things that they desperately want to say but don't know how. I think that my role is to give you permission to say it wrong, to be a willing audience to your mistaken articulation, to your messy articulation, to your first utterances, and then to help you craft that utterance into something that you actually fucking mean. Excuse my language, but there's no poem that I've ever written right the first time. There's nothing that I've said for the first time that came out perfectly, chef's kiss. Like, doesn't really happen. It takes a lot of practice to articulate some of these deeply held doubts, fears, or even joys, to say them with what you mean. That said, I mentioned before, I value candor. And so I think my role is to exhibit candor, to be as open and as vulnerable as possible, to be as deliberate and persnickety about my work as possible, so that you have permission to be candid and vulnerable, and then also persnickety and precise, right? Like, part of the thing that I do as an educator, as a performer, as a creative person, is to just create a space where you feel safe enough to articulate a thing that maybe you haven't felt safe enough to articulate before. And I think that part of my job is to do that myself, to show you that it is possible, right? To risk something so that you might in turn take the risk yourself. So I have no delusion that it's easy to do what I do, to talk about my shit it feels awful sometimes to talk about my fear or to be that angry. But I think that let me just say this. I spent a lot of time after coming out of that incredibly white high school, and then I went to the University of Michigan, and I was at the University of Michigan in 2002, which I don't know if you remember this tiny little thing that happened, which is affirmative action went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court case was living in Michigan. So the University of Michigan's admissions policies were at the Supreme Court to decide whether or not they were doing something that was appropriate or inappropriate in terms of welcoming students of color, right? And so to be in that environment where people were arguing about whether or not I specifically actually deserve to be on that campus is a mind game, right? I know how hard I worked, and yet my validity in that space was constantly in question. So I went from primarily white elementary, middle school, and high schools to primarily white college, where not only was it primarily white, but it was also a battleground for whether or not my acceptance was valid. And then I went to Columbia University in the city of New York for graduate school, which is one of the oldest, whitest institutions in the country, right? Like, it's an Ivy League because it's old. And so then I was there, and I was in the city of New York, I was studying drama. I never had a Black teacher. So I think I spent a lot of time in an educational context very, very angry and very, very frustrated that my classics weren't considered, that my point of view didn't matter, that I never had a teacher that looked like me, that my everything my parents told me about how smart and beautiful and intelligent I was felt like it was under attack when I went into these institutions. So I was very angry for a long time, very frustrated for a long time. And I turned that anger inward, which I think a lot of students of color do. They spend a lot of time stewing in that anger, believing that they don't belong, being depressed and frustrated. And I think that part of my job, part of my role in terms of making space for students of color is to encourage a healthy, I don't know, healthy is a judgment, but encourage a productive means for channeling that anger into something creative. And I don't mean making a poem necessarily. I mean, you could be creating a group for, I don't know, whatever it is that you love, a Lego group, right? Like creating a space where you feel seen and safe outside of your identity, which feels like it's constantly in question. And so that's what I hope to do. I hope to say, I know it feels dangerous to articulate the thing that you desperately want to say. Try it out on me and let's see how it goes. And because I had somebody do that for me, I think I'm a more balanced individual. I still get mad sometimes. I mean, we live in the United States of America. It's constant fodder for being pissed off, right? But I think I now have a productive channel for that anger and for that sadness and for that frustration. And I hope to offer that to people who I come in contact with as well, right? Really just a prompt, somewhere to put that emotion so that it's not formless and all-encompassing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You talked about positioning yourself around anger, fear, giving permission, help, exhibit, permission to exhibit a safe space. My second question, which was about whiplash, but more about what do you do with that now? Because now in this moment, systemic racism is laid bare, right?
Yeah.
The systemic racism that is being laid bare because the coronavirus is marking a path on Black bodies. 78% of the deaths are Black people. 78%, and those are only the ones that have been counted, right? What is also evident, and people keep saying, oh, we're in this together, is that that's not true. Low-income communities are being decimated because they are the ones who are, how many are who are the drivers? You talked about your father at the grocery store. Low-income communities are still at especially here in this region where there is a mighty disparity, income inequality, right? People don't actually, it's not as evident, but it's very much there, right? And so what do students do, right? They're displaced, they're not on campus, they're off somewhere trying to figure out how to get this education done for the semester in wherever they are. They're angry, they have all of these things, but they're also having to see, especially Black students, what the moment is doing and saying and how it's locating them. What talk to us a little bit about it. I know, right? I mean,
It's a lot. It's a whole fucking lot, you know? And I think, okay, so I have a number of things. First of all, I'm coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York, okay? The epicenter of the epicenter. It is devastating here. And like I said, I've been well-educated my whole entire life. I went to an Ivy League university. I can order my groceries and have them come to my door, right? I'm sitting in Brooklyn from a place of incredible privilege. And so I understand what it means to have access to the internet right now, to be able to do this with y'all right now, to have somebody, a partner who can take care of my baby right now so that I can be here sharing my poems with you and talking philosophically about what we do, right? This is a very weird and incredibly privileged position from which I sit in order to talk about anything when it comes to the way that coronavirus is devastating certain communities, right? That said, it's very frustrating to me how some people are taking this moment for granted, requiring productivity, saying, now's the time to get in the best shape of your life. TM. Now's the time to write that masterpiece. Remember Shakespeare when he was in isolation? He wrote Macbeth. What are you gonna do, right? I'm gonna sit on my ass and try to survive the pandemic. That's what I'm gonna do, right? I'm gonna just take care of my mental health for a moment. And I think people who are doing that are people who are saying, don't forget that you can still be productive in the midst of a crisis, are people who had never felt crisis before. Are people who don't live constantly in crisis, right? Are people who have the kinds of jobs that transfer easily to remote working and methods, right? That people who can have Amazon deliver their shit. Meanwhile, because of the way that the institutions are built in our country, it just so happens that the vast majority of people who work in service are people of color. It's because those are jobs that white people don't typically have never had to have. They sit in positions and I'm not talking about specific white people, although we could do that too, because there's some who I'm incredibly frustrated with, people who work for the New York Stock Exchange, for instance, but whatever. Like, there's certain people who I think are able to think of this as an opportunity rather than to think of this as a moment for survival. And that, I think, the transparency of that right now is deeply frustrating to me. And so what does that mean for our students? And particularly, what does that mean for our students who live in rural communities where isolation is already a fabric of their lives, now they're further isolated? And then what does that mean for students of color who go to school in rural communities where isolation is a part of it, on top of isolation, on top of a social isolation? Like, what that means for me is that if you can't write that essay, the essay, it's not gonna come, right? What that means is you have to prioritize as best you can your mental health so that your body, your brain is connected to your body, right? So that your body can keep you physically healthy so that you can return to fight another day. Sometimes I think people are like, we gotta fight today, right now. And I think sometimes we forget that we gotta get this shit aligned before we can go out in the world and fight any other battle. And so I think what I've been telling my students is, show up when you can, how you can, and as best you can. I don't expect you to arrive at Zoom and be in a great mood every day. I don't expect you to show up to Zoom if you live in a 1-bedroom with 5 other people who are all sharing a computer and the internet is spotty, right? I don't expect you to pretend as if everything is normal, because it is not normal. And I think that there is something about even what we think about as normal that is not normal. Now, can you imagine living in Flint? You already didn't have water. See how quickly we metabolize that and normalize that? And now Flint is full of Black people, mostly Black people, who don't have clean water and who can't go out to get it. See how quickly we normalize that? We just metabolized, oh, certain communities don't need fresh water. Forgot about it, right? That's very weird to me. Or the way that we think about, we don't think about, rather, that our increased desire to have things delivered to us by Amazon means that there's an increased need for workers in Amazon factories, means that there's an increased amount of people who work for low wages that are going to get sick because Amazon doesn't really give a shit about them. So Amazon is reporting its largest grossing numbers in history last month, while it is also not providing paid sick leave to its employees. And I'll give you one guess about what those employees look like. My dad, my actual father, who is not being offered paid sick leave, whose job is in jeopardy if he takes his vacation right now. So he doesn't actually have a choice. And so when I sit here and I listen to our government or elected officials say things like, we really got to get the economy going, what they're saying is my dad's life is less important than the economy. What they're saying is we've run the math and these deaths are not as devastating as our potential pocket losses. That's what they're saying. So I think, I don't know, I'm rambling right now because so much of it is actually living on my father's diabetic body that it's hard not to take it personally when they say some people are gonna die and that's just it, but we really gotta get back out there and get those restaurants open again. I'm just very confused about it, very frustrated about it, and also so like, what else is new? Because this is America and they've always decided which bodies are worth something and which ones aren't. And so part of it is so everyday, mundane American shenanigans, and part of it is so novel, new, never had anything like this, that it's really hard for me to connect those things, right? Like I fully expect them to tell me that my grandmother doesn't matter, and also I am shocked and devastated by it every single time, and also sort of mad at myself for being surprised and disappointed by this country, even though it always disappoints me. Because it's my home. You know, I love it. This is my home. It's my only home. But it is an abusive relationship. And
Wow.
I don't exactly know how to get out of it. I can't get out of it. And so I guess, you know, I think about James Baldwin all the time, who said, because I love America, it's my job to, I'm going to misquote it, but it's my job to critique it fiercely. And so I think that's what I do. I watch as carefully as I can. I consider my own positionality as carefully as I can. And then I speak as bravely as I can so that other people might feel that that's also possible. And that is my role. And so I would say to students, whoever you are and have always been, lean into that hard right now and crystallize it into something that is even more essentially you than it was maybe a month ago, right? So if what you do is grow the best damn carrots, get it popping. Get your carrot game, take your carrot game up a notch, right? What I do is write poems. I'm gonna try to take my poem game up a notch, right? If what you do is create Zoom communities, take that shit up a notch, right? Just be more essentially you with less fear than you've ever had before, because right now, whatever role you inhabit, I guarantee it's incredibly important to us staying connected and staying alive. I don't know how else to say it.
No, get your carrot game up.
That's what I mean it though.
Get your carrot game up. That's what I'm writing down. That is a euphemism for, yeah, we can hear this. The next time I talk to that library staff, I'm gonna say, get your carrot game up. Yes. Look here, man. Lauren, I'm going to just let you take over.
I don't know what to do. What should I do?
If you guys have any questions, Erin, is that how we plan this? If you guys have any questions, shoot them right away to Lauren. You may have some comments or something you want to say about some of the work she just let us have or let us inhabit a while ago, shared with us. Please let us know. You can speak it out if you are able to, or just type it in. This is an amazing thing, Lauren, and I'm glad that you're here simply because we didn't conceive this as a standalone, as a single moment. The project was conceived as okay. So now it's there. It's been launched. We want the students to take ownership of this, right? And so when Erin conceptualized the virtual aspect of this and put together this program, it was about the students. It was for the students to take ownership of this and take this where they want to. And so I'm hoping that if students are on here, they will type in some questions if they don't feel empowered enough to speak. You know, if they don't feel empowered to get their carrot game up, you know, that if not the students or anyone else. But I
just have to say really quickly that
please
sometimes when I talk about this stuff, I may come off as if what I'm encouraging you to do is easy. It is profoundly difficult to speak up. It's like sometimes nearly impossible to say what you mean to say. And so I don't want to be flippant about the ask. What I'm suggesting that you do right now is profoundly courageous, right? Like it's not, even in this Zoom right now, to unmute your mic and ask a question, or to unmute your mic and say something that's on your heart can be terrifying, right? And I often find that it's more scary to say things in a room full of people that you know, a small room full of people that you know. Sometimes it's more difficult to do that than it is to talk to 10,000 people, right? Like I performed at the Apollo and that was hard, but some of the hardest audiences I have are like 5 people who know me well and I'm saying something for the first time. Because when you were talking about, Nikki, performing, showing up to these spaces and being somebody that everybody expects you to be, that shit is exhausting. And so, but sometimes the exhausting nature of continuing to be who everybody thinks that you are going to be feels easier than saying for the first time the thing that you actually want to say, and maybe having people think about you differently or think about you in ways that they didn't know you before. And so I come from a Black feminist philosophical point of view. Like I come from Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison and people for whom careful articulation was their job, and people for whom spent a lot of time, their entire livelihoods and their entire careers, speaking from the perspective of Black womanhood, for Black womanhood, to diversify what Black womanhood looks like. And even for them, it wasn't easy. And so I think, I just want to say that, there's this, I spent a lot of time working with Audre Lorde, and she is incredible for so many reasons, but she spent the entirety of her creative life sort of kicking against silences that we betray ourselves into. She was really focused on the silences and the things that we don't say even to ourselves. And she really challenged herself and other people. She really dared them to speak their discomfort, even at the risk of it being misunderstood, is what she said. And so I think that if I could just call in the spirit of Audre Lorde and ask that if there's anybody in here who has something, you know who you are because your heart is beating right now. You feel like I'm talking directly to you. I don't know any of y'all, but you know that it feels like I'm looking at you, right? You know who you are. There's something that is burning to be said, but the fear is keeping it inside. And so I think I'll just call in Audre Lorde, and then I'll shut the hell up and see if anybody takes the call to articulate something, maybe for the first time, or to just speak up, even if they might be misunderstood, or even if it feels profoundly uncomfortable.
Well, I don't know that my heart is. No. You go ahead, Whitney.
Oh, I was gonna say you could go.
No, you go.
No, you go, Whitney.
I was just gonna agree on what you said, where it's like you're disappointed, but you're not really surprised. Because I feel like at the beginning of, like, before this was a full-blown pandemic, and everyone's like, oh my God, what is America gonna do? I can't believe they don't care. And it's like, we've been dealing with this for like our entire lives. Like, as a Black person, you're not really surprised at anything that America does to show that it doesn't care, because you're used to it. So when other people are like, oh my God, I can't believe they would do this. I can't believe, like, they don't care enough about us, like, make sure that we're safe and healthy. I'm like, it's nothing new. Like, it's really nothing new. And imposter syndrome, I feel like most of my friends go to PWIs, which, I mean, I feel like everybody knows what it stands for, but I'm going to say it anyways, which is a predominantly white institution. And let's be honest, Paul Smith's is a PWI. And so a lot of my friends we'll talk about our experiences and stuff, and we don't realize it, but like the first time I went back home, I almost forgot how to code switch because I was at school for so long that I was in my professional tone. And then I went home and like, I'm Haitian. So I was like born in Haiti, speak Creole, all that. Like, and all my friends are Jamaican, Trinidadian, like all the Caribbean countries you can think of. So when we speak, you know how Caribbeans are. Like when we speak, we speak. So it was really hard of like code switching, but I feel like at this point, if no one's ever met me before and like for the first time, my first instinct is not to go to Brooklyn slang, but to go to like my PWI slang. And like, it's kind of hard because my friends are like, wow, like, where did you learn that? I bet you learned that up there. And I was like, crap, I probably did. And I don't know, it's a very weird feeling. And I think the only reason that I didn't feel imposter syndrome when I got to my school is because I had a counselor, and it's very funny because my college counselor was a white 75-year-old man. And I've had him since freshman year of high school. And I remember the first time he made us realize that we were people of color. Like, I mean, but he made us realize that when one of my friends, she's Dominican, and we were having a class discussion on like an assignment he'd given us. And she was like, yeah, I went on Google and I searched it up, and he tore her apart. And he was like, you have to realize that when you go to these schools, these professors are going to look at you like, oh, you're just a Black kid from the city, you're just a person of color from the city, and you're not educated. And you can't just say words like search it up. You have to like say, I researched it, or, you have to use the right words with them. And it wasn't malicious intent. It was just to get you to recognize that you're going to a completely different world and that people aren't going to look at you the same way. So you have to speak a different way, in a certain way. And I think I kind of took it to heart because, like, I don't know, but I mean, I love him. He's got me to where I am. And I feel like a lot of people should have somebody like that because he taught me, like, you need a gorilla at an institution. And a gorilla is somebody that can back you up when you face racial injustices, and somebody that has power on your campus. Because you as a Black student, most upper level people would not believe you. So what you need is a gorilla in your corner, somebody that's going to back up your claims, because a lot of PWIs don't want to face the racial inequalities on their campus. They don't. They want to push it aside, ignore it, make it go away as quick as possible. And that's why you need that gorilla. So yeah,
thank you for sharing that. I just want to I want to just point out something that you said, which is that some people are surprised at how little the sort of government or people in power care about people, and this is their first time experiencing that. And I think in some ways, like, sometimes I could be real blackety black about that and be like, oh, you're just not noticing that America is trash? Ugh, must be nice. But also, like, there is also this thing where now that you're noticing that America is trash, what are you gonna do? Now that you see it, you can't unsee it. Don't unsee it. Try to stay in this uncomfortable place where now that you know that they would rather risk your grandmother than give you your, hazard pay, right? They would rather have you die and be put in a mass grave somewhere in Queens than risk the economy. Now that you know, I'm sorry that you're just now finding it out. It's a privilege that you're just now finding out. But now that you know, what are you gonna do? So it's important for me, at least, to remind myself not to be flippant about people who just found out. Because I think there's a reason that you've been protected. That's why you just now are seeing it. But now that you see it, shut the hell up, listen to the people that have been writing about it for hundreds of years, and try not to go back into a place of blindness about it. Mm-hmm. So thank you for saying that, because it's really important to not write those people off. I think this is a moment where we can welcome those people into the resistance, right? Anyway.
But that's all I had to say. And I have friends all over the world, and I actually have a friend who lives in Ireland, and apparently what they're doing is they're giving their people who have lost their jobs to COVID-19, they're giving those people 650 euros a week. And I'm like, it's just ridiculous. I don't know. Like when you put it in the grand scheme of things, like even the stock market, which when you mentioned about those Wall Street people, I knew exactly who you were talking about and how they're making a profit off of this because they knew what the government was going to do. And then they leveraged their stocks so they can make the maximum amount of money. But that's a whole nother like hour-long conversation. But like they put $14 trillion into the stock market just so it could go back up for what, a couple hours? When we have almost $2 trillion of student debt in this country, that could have been erased just like that. And they just wanted enough to put that money into it.
Yeah, there's always seems to be money to bail out a major corporation, but never money to bail out a struggling, working, or middle class. Anyway, anybody else got a little burning butterfly in their heart that wants to say something?
But there are a couple of comments in the chat section that I think may warrant a little bit of conversation. I don't know if everyone is still here, but I just I like to position myself as a political economist. So I just want to say something quickly about it is $2 trillion worth of student loan debt. Hey, I got 4 degrees. I got me some student loans. It's $2 trillion. I keep watching that and counting up how much not-for-profit years I have so they can bump something off eventually. But I think what we don't educate our young people on is political economy of the penultimate neoliberal capitalist institution or country. And that's what America is. So if we go to Canada, Whitney just mentioned Ireland and they're getting 650 euros a week. The Canadians, when this started, because half of Jamaica lives in Canada, the other half lives in London, Brixton, and the rest is in America. So I've gotten my information weekly from my family in Toronto. They got $6,000 at the beginning of all of this when they were trying to assess about the job situation with the first soft closure. The minute they closed, they announced that they were giving 1,200 Canadian dollars per month for the next 4 months. And this was last month that they announced this. That is when they started closing the border to just Canadian citizens and residents. $1,200 per month for the next 4 months. And at the 4-month mark, they would assess to see how many people can go back to work and so on, and then decide if they need to give them another 4 months worth of $1,200 a month. Our asses only got $1,200 a month, right? And so it's only some people that get the $1,200 a month. And even within—
Not a month, one time.
Not a month, just period.
Time. Oh, sorry, one time, $1,200. And remember now, and so hear me now, I'm code switching. So I'm gonna use the African-American vernacular. Come on now, I'm gonna preach, right? Remember now, even CNN and all of the other sort of prime target news channels are saying, you gotta watch out $1,200 because the ones who need it the most, those creditors, the people who are calling you 24 hours a day, they're gonna siphon off that money before you can get it. So you are talking about a system that is designed for mass population race to the bottom. It is not designed. This idea about the middle class is a myth in the penultimate neoliberal capitalist system. Okay, so please, this talk about the whole thing and the people are suffering at the bottom, blah, blah, it will not change. And this idea of returning to normal, what is normalcy? There was a problem with normal to begin with. And that's what I talk when I'm sitting in the room full of when we start talking about race and class and gender and sexuality, and the poor students in the PWIs sit there uncomfortable because we're talking about some uncomfortable topics. I'm like, don't get it twisted, okay? Population control means that you are part of that system too. You understand? And you are being manipulated for the race to the bottom because profit must win in a neoliberal capitalist society. And so that means for 99% of your asses, you are part of that race to the bottom. You understand? And so if you use race, gender, and sexuality to justify othering the person sitting next to you, you are deceiving yourself, right? So anyway, this is just me trying to get the conversation going. Yeah. Lauren, take over.
I'll just say one quick thing. So I want to go back to Lauren for a second. Lauren, as first of all, I want to thank you for speaking truth to power. I also want to thank, where's Whitney? Whitney for chiming in as well, and also speaking truth to power. And Lauren, you talked about how difficult it is to speak up in these spaces, and people might not know that even as an administrator, as a Black administrator, it is extremely difficult to kind of navigate. You have to be careful how you navigate these spaces, because if you're not careful, you're labeled as a strong personality. There are all kinds of code words that I've heard over the years. Your strong personality, or you're being sensitive when you speak up in these spaces. So even as an administrator, those of us who make the decisions have to be careful how we speak up, because if we're not careful how we speak up, or if we don't navigate that carefully, we're marginalized and disempowered. So it's not just the students. As I listened to all that you were saying, Lauren, it reminded me, and you quoted James Baldwin, and it reminded me of something James Baldwin said, and it was that I love America, and you might know this, I love America more than any other country in this world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. You know, I remember when—
That's what I was misquoting terribly. Thank you for bringing that. Yes, thank you.
I remember when, and I'll end with this. I'll remember when Michelle Obama, when President Obama ran for the first time in 2008, and Michelle Obama was giving a speech, I think it was in New Jersey, and she talked about her experience at Princeton and talked about loving this country, but feeling like she could criticize the country. I remember how relentlessly people came after her because they said, how dare you criticize the country when you went to Princeton and you're an attorney? Well, you know, we can have all of those labels and still say how America have failed a lot of folks. And America failed a lot of folks, and we all need to acknowledge that. And until we acknowledge that and own that and say what we're prepared to do personally, we're gonna be just in this revolving door for centuries to come. And with that, I'm gonna shut up.
I love that you said that, because I think there's something about being in, and listen, we're talking about Blackness, but this is true for any kind of marginality that you have, right? Like if you are non-able-bodied, if you're a neurodiverse person, if you are a person of size, if you are queer, you feel it. If you're a woman, you kind of feel it. You know, it's not just about Blackness. Blackness is the thing that I know most intimately, right? But I think there is this sort of notion that we should be grateful for what we have. You should be thankful that you're here at the University of Michigan. You should be thankful. Why are you complaining so? You should be so thankful that we opened our doors and welcomed you in. You didn't have to be here. You should show gratitude, right? That's the attitude that they came at the Obamas with all the time. You should be very grateful that we've given you this modicum of a life, this sliver of respect, because we didn't have to give it to you at all. We didn't have to let you into our Ivy League university. How dare you complain? How dare you not show your gratitude? And I think that sometimes people of color or people of difference in a variety of different ways internalize that and they metabolize it into a kind of silence. And they say, well, I guess I'm really disappointed with this, but I should just be grateful. You know what? It's not all bad. I just got microaggressed, made to feel micro-invalidated, and that I just had this really terrible experience, but at least I'm here. That's the kind of math we do with our experience all the time. And I think that kind of math is very, very destructive to the self and very, very productive for the status quo. And so I think everything that I do in my creative life and in my life as an educator is to help students and to help myself remember that it's okay to question the status quo and to prioritize my own narrative and to think from my own point of view about whether or not I think that this is trash, right? Like that's what I have to keep reminding myself to do, to prioritize my own experience, regardless of what the status quo tells me I should be grateful for or who I should be. And I try to listen to that tiny little voice and elevate that tiny little voice and speak back to the silence so that I can love myself, because that's the most dangerous thing that we can do, I think, is love ourselves.
There's someone on here who wrote something about, and you just said love yourself, and she said, the person said, maybe one thing Black people can do to regain their power is to first recognize that their Blackness is not a stigma. People don't do things against us because of the color of our skin, but because of the ignorance and sickness within themselves. And then that person, yes, so, and then the same person followed up and said, the thing is, why should we be thankful for stuff we worked hard for? So I don't know if that person wants to acknowledge themselves, but I didn't want to call out any names if they're not feeling so empowered or you know, a little reticent. But could you pick that up a little?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's all in our head. It's all in our head. It's the way that the narratives have been shaped for centuries. It's not our fault that we think this way. We've been conditioned to think this way. And part of the work of being a self-reflective educator or a self-reflective person is to be asking questions about the narratives that we trumpet all the time, to be like, do I actually believe that? I don't know if I actually believe. Let me dig into that a little bit. Let me see how that feels based on my experience and my point of view. And if that doesn't jive, then that's not real to me. It doesn't mean that it's not real. It just means that I'm encouraging students and people to think inside this canon, right? Like there are people that we've been told to read. There are people that we've been told to prioritize. Everything that, even in the world of poetry, right? Like I'm taught that a poem about a wheelbarrow is exceptional. I don't know shit about wheelbarrows. It's not exceptional to me. Like, I don't get it, right? What I understand, I have to build the canon inside this body, from this point of view, from this experience. I need to find what speaks to me and then speak back to that. I need to be in conversation with people who want to be in conversation with me. I think I spent a lot of time as a young person speaking against something, responding to, being reactionary, being on my back foot, right? Like fighting to be seen and to be heard. And now I know that if I prioritize this, if I spend all the time in here going in, then I'm speaking toward something, not against something. I'm speaking for something. I'm speaking to someone who also have a similar experience. And so rather than spending a lot of time, as much time as I did before, speaking against, I now speak toward the thing that gives me joy, toward the thing that brings me community, toward the thing that shines the light, toward the thing that makes me happy, toward the thing that gets me toward love rather than toward anger. Because I think there's a way in which we can internalize all these messages that tell us that we ain't shit. And I'm tired of that. Dead that. That's over. That's over. It's over for me. I'm older than a lot of the students in this room, I think, right? I'm 36 now, and it took me a long time to dead some of those terrible messages that told me that I wasn't shit. That told me that if I wasn't speaking proper English, then I couldn't be understood. It's just not real. It is true. It is hyper present, but it's also not real. And I think that's where the fear comes from in some ways, that we have built this invisible monster is over here telling us that if we are our authentic selves, then we will be X'd out of the American project, that we will be not belonging. But what I found from experience, what my experience has shown to me, is that the closer I am to my own authentic self, the more likely I am to be in community. Now, how about that? Everything that told me something about myself before was like, if you're your true self, if you don't perform, if you don't code switch, if you don't be like us, if you don't straighten your hair, if you don't you're not gonna belong. And all that time I was doing those things trying to belong, I felt isolated as fuck. Excuse my language, but I did. And the minute that I came closer to myself, that I prioritized this shit right here, I started to feel like I belonged. I found my people.
Fire!
I'm just sorry that there is the risk of being yourself usually pays off. Not in the immediate, it might take a while. It's gonna be hard, but it usually pays off. You usually find your folks. You usually find the gorillas, the people that are gonna fight for you. And in all that, you find the voice that's gonna allow you to fight for your damn self. And that is really what I want you to do. That's what I mean by step your carrot game up, right? If what you do is carrots, do that shit as best as you possibly can. Because nothing that you do to try to be acceptable to the machine is going to work out for you. I almost guarantee, Martin Luther King got shot in a suit. It doesn't matter what you wear. It doesn't matter how you say it. It doesn't matter what your hair looks like. It doesn't matter if you dress in clothes that don't fit the gender. None of it matters. People are gonna tell you that it matters more than anything else. And I'm here to tell you that that's bullshit, right? Be as authentic as you can and watch how your people start to show up. Watch how they arrive.
So, hi. So I'm a therapist at the school, and so I spend a lot of my time, especially with the students of color, not just Black students, but any student that is any sort of minority on campus, in doing that sort of work and like working to, you know, do whatever makes you feel most comfortable, because the space environmentally does not feel safe a lot of the time, and it feels very like hyper visible. I'm wondering, and what you're asking the student to do is a lot of work for them to do on their own, but it's almost unfair to ask them to do all of this work. I'm wondering what the system, the environment can do to help promote that growth in those students as well, because it could take a lot for an 18, 19, 20-year-old to have to do that work, in addition to like being in school and figuring that out as well. So we are the people that have the power. What can we do to make it easier for them?
Listen, okay, so it is not just work, it's labor. It's laborious as hell, and it's exhausting. My mama, she used to make me do double homework, right? Because I went to these primarily white institutions, and so I would have to do my homework for these primarily white institutions, and I had to come home and read about Black people too, because she knew that I was learning about that. So I've been doing double homework for my entire life. You know, I understand that it's exhausting, and I understand that the ask is inherently unfair. And I think what institutions can do, it's so hard because no, I know, it's just institution is gonna reproduce knowledge that benefits the institution. That's what institutions do, right? The fact that you're even there, hallelujah. You know what I'm saying? Because I never had a Black teacher. I didn't have a Black counselor. When I was overwhelmed with stuff when I was at Columbia, I went to a counselor and I was like, you know, this is going on with my family. This is going on with my job. This is going on in my classes. This is going on in my dreams. In my creative world, this is happening. All this is happening, this is happening. And I was still getting straight A's, and she just looked at me and she said, wow, that's a lot. I'm gonna refer you to somebody. She couldn't even say to me, and to me, what I was dealing with was just your sort of average run-of-the-mill Black person at a primarily white institution shit, right? Like, but for her, it was more than she could even begin to. I didn't even have a full session because she was so ready to ship me out to somebody that could do it better. So I guess the institutions need to prioritize having people like you around. They need to legitimately diversify the staff, and not just the teachers, but everybody else. Even the people who work in the lunchroom need to look like us, need to be reflective of the student body. And I think part of that work is getting institutions to value our stories. And that is not easy to do. And so in the meantime, what you can do is what you're doing, is to continue to validate the stories and to tell the students that, look, if you don't want to do that work in the world, it behooves you to do that work for yourself. You don't have to go out and show everybody how much work you've been doing, but you do need to go home and value yourself, right? Like, you do need to go home and try to read for yourself, even if that means that you don't get to do all the work for this class that doesn't make you feel seen or heard, right? Like, I don't know. Listen, shit, I don't know. I wish I did, but I just really don't. I hate that my best advice is to encourage students of color to do more work. But I think that work is life-saving, and maybe it's worth it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, y'all, I have to go. My baby's downstairs. I'm supposed to be here for an hour.
Yeah, so I was just going to say we're going to wrap up. There are a couple more. I know Mike had asked a very important question, okay. And then another person here wrote, we need more Black counselors, because how can you help me with my struggle if you can't even begin to understand it? Okay, that one is enormously critical. So and it looks like it may be a student. We need more Black counselors, because how can, oh yeah, Whitney. So the Paul Smith student, people up here, I'm not Paul Smith, so I don't have that kind of burden, to the institution. But that one's, I'm gonna give a hand signal. And just lastly, I want to, Mike, do you want to read what you wrote, or no? All right. So, but Whitney, do you want to say? I'm gonna ask Whitney to close with any comments. And then we'll just wrap up.
Wait, I do want to, Mike, is it okay if I read what you wrote? Because I think that's an interesting idea, gratitude in conflict with injustice, anger, that I haven't thought a lot about. Where does gratitude fit into life, and anger fit into life? And can those things be a both and, or an either or? And when are those appropriate? Thanks for bringing up this thought. And I think I want to lean on this, because it's important to recognize that there's an incredible book of poems, which I'll write in the chat, called Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude by Ross Gay. And it is a book about grief, but all of the poems are about joy. And I think that this is the job of the artist in some ways, to try to link things that feel like they inherently don't fit together, right? This has everything to do with what, I'm sorry, I don't know what S. Jones, that's what it says, I don't know your first name, but this is the thing about requiring more work so that students can feel more love, that artists don't shy away from what feels like things that don't fit together, that contradictory space, the space in between that contradiction, is where the creativity lives, and that's where innovation is born. So in a life where there is gratitude and anger, trying to mash those things together is how you make friction, which is how you make fire, which is how you make art, which is how you create something. That in those places of friction is actually where the sparks live. And so I try not to say I either have to be grateful or angry. I try to say, what do my gratitude and anger have to do with one another? What do my grief and joy have to do with one another, right? And so I think we need to lean into that place of conflict, and that's that place of discomfort. We need to lean into it because it's creative, that space. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's really important that we talk about that. I'm just gonna drop the name of that book of poems in the chat.
Whitney, did you want to say anything lastly?
I mean, my comment was kind of like, general, because I mean, there aren't a lot of like Black psychologists or psychiatrists or counselors in general, but especially at schools, because if I say, like, if you don't understand what it's like having like a little, like my little brother is 7 and he's growing, like I live in Brooklyn and my mom is there and my little brother is 7, but it's like, and I'm 20, I'm living away from home, I'm like having all these experiences, but I still worry about him because you never know. And like my mom works in a hospital, so she's not always there to watch over him, and it's my grandma. So like if he hangs out with the wrong crowd, if he gets caught wrong place, wrong time type of situation, what are we gonna do about that? And it's like, if you have those kind of problems, how are they gonna help you if they don't understand where you're coming from? Like, oh wow, that sucks. Well, like that doesn't help me whatsoever. So yeah.
Yeah, I also want to say one more thing about, and Terry, I don't think I responded appropriately or with enough gratitude for what you were saying about how difficult it is to be an administrator in these kinds of spaces. Like that there's an assumption on the part of students and faculty sometimes that administrators have this incredible amount of power, and you do, but you're also beholden to boards and all people that have more power. Like there's always somebody with more power, right? Like it's never just as easy as saying I'm in charge, right? And so
you're just one of many vice presidents. You're not the only vice president.
Yeah, so all of it is, there's so much negotiation to be happening. But that said, I think that what administrators can do, or what people that do have even a modicum of power in these institutions can do, is encourage educators to be culturally responsive. Like I think that there's a world where culturally responsive education right now is the most important thing that we can do, and that requires educators and administrators to do the work of acknowledging what themselves, the bias that they come to the room with, the things that they don't know, so that they don't project what they believe to be right in the world onto all their students, and therefore privilege their own point of view beyond that of their students, right? So being culturally responsive means doing the work to learn what your students are bringing to the table, and then doing the work to learn how to value what your students bring to the table. And so I think, try to get your institution to be more culturally responsive. And I think there's somebody in the chat that's saying, that they're a white person, but that they have experience where they feel outside as well. And that is also true. Like class is another one of these things that really pushes down on all of us, right? That makes us feel like we don't belong. And I think it doesn't, even if you're white, you have an individual experience that is not the same always as what whiteness tells you you should be. And I think whoever you are, the power that you have is to speak from your individual experiences, to make clear as best you can and to articulate as clearly as you can who you are, what you make, why it matters in the world, and to do so that people don't write a story onto you. Zora Neale Hurston said, I speak up, I'm gonna butcher everybody's quote, but she said, like, I speak up because if I don't, they'll kill me and tell me that I liked it, right? Like your job is to speak up for yourself as best you can, even when it feels, and especially when it feels dangerous.
Yes.
That's the thing, I feel like that's the note that I want to leave on. Not even when, but especially when it feels dangerous. Those are the moments where you have to figure out how to speak up even more.
Thank you. Martin Luther King said, your silence will not save you. So yes, just like Zora, yay. And I keep thinking about, I think Zora in passing. So yes. But anybody else wants to say anything? I'd love for this opportunity for any students on here to get in a last question, a comment, or anything. This was for you students, even though I don't know if many of you are on here, but this was for the students. I'd love to close with a member of the library, just saying something to Lauren, because you guys are central. You are the spearheads. You are the foundation of making this possible. Terry, the VP's office of Student Affairs and Campus Life. You are a more remarkable person. And he was just like, whatever you want to do, we'll make it happen. Yeah. So, and this is what Erin made happen. So anyone from the library wants to say anything? Mike, I don't know if anyone else is on here.
I want to defer to Erin and Amanda. They both did all the work on this, obviously. I appreciate you listing my name, but I'm not going to take credit. They did a lot of work, so thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Lauren. I don't think that Paul Smith's has many opportunities to offer programs like this to our students, and I hope it's been meaningful for them in this time that I think is very, very difficult for all of us, but especially for our students of color. And Nikki, thank you so much for your work on this project. I really hope that students feel that the library is a space for them where they can come and learn and ask questions. We are here for you. You are welcome to come and learn anything about the institution. Our archives are there for you. Our resources are all there for you. And we don't want the library to feel like an intimidating space. All of us in the library, we are librarians because we want to help people access information with no barriers. That is our job. And so, yeah, I'm really glad that we could offer this program. I'm looking forward to continuing it. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki, Lauren, everyone who helped put this together. I think this was made so much more powerful by having, you know, voices involved who can speak to this. And it's not just, I think it was actually to our benefit that this ended up being a forum instead of a display, because I think we got a lot more meaningful content out of this by being able to have individual voices. And thank you also to all the students who joined this. I hope we'll get even more next time.
This has been really dope, y'all. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bless you, Lauren. Bless you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for allowing me to do this and for your massive amount of flexibility, and just love you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.